discussion tonight will examine temporary marriage from an ethical family perspective. Because one of the common misconceptions, or one of the common objections, or even questions that today many people ask is, this in the end leads to negative consequences. Yes, we've established beyond any doubt that this is part of Sharia. This existed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. He clearly gave permission to his companions to engage in this type of marriage contract. We understand that. This is part of Sharia. But what about the consequences? Why would Sharia allow this type of marriage when some people view it as immoral, when some people abuse it, when some people basically use this as an opportunity just to tend to their desires? What's the philosophy? What's the wisdom behind it, right? So in our discussion tonight, we'll examine several perspectives about temporary marriage, given that it is part of our Sharia. How do we justify it, basically? What's the purpose behind it, and what are the limits? So I would like to share with you a number of points. Number one, why did Islam allow this type of marriage? What is the reason behind it? You're all very aware that the religion of Islam bans any type of sexual activity outside of a marriage contract, outside of a legal relationship. The only relationships that Islam recognizes are three. One is the permanent marriage. One is the temporary marriage. What's the third one? Milk al-yamin, right, slavery. And if a woman is owned as a slave to her master, then with certain conditions she becomes lawful to him. These are the only three types of relationships that the religion of Islam allows. Anything outside of that, Islam condemns, considers immoral, considers illegal. Now, there are certain circumstances that prevent a person from getting married on a permanent basis. Either they don't have the financial support yet, and they live in a community or a society that will not give this person an opportunity to get married unless they are financially stable, they have a stable job, or they've finished their education. Today, one of the conditions that families are imposing is what? You have to finish your education. I am aware of parents who impose on their children that not only do you have to finish your bachelor's degree, you even have to finish your master's degree and even a PhD. I know some families that are strict with this. Then you can discuss marriage. For now, consider this a closed file. Don't even try. So for some people, for some youth, it's virtually impossible for them to get married. Families will not approve of this, or they're in very difficult financial circumstances. They simply cannot get married. Now, ideally, the ideal situation or recommendation for these people is to be patient and resist their temptations. But let's face it, let's be realistic. People start experiencing temptation in their teenage years. Now, 10 years later, this person is 22, 23, 24, 25, and they're still not able to get married. Now, being realistic, right? If you ask people, if you ask youth for 10, 15 years of their lives to be patient, to exercise restraint, to resist their temptation, is that practical or possible? Maybe some can. Maybe 10%, 20%, 30% are able to manage. But living in a society that actually provokes people from this aspect, with the media, with the popular culture, right? Is this something realistic? If Islam said, look, there is absolutely no channel for you until you get permanently married, what were the consequences of that? That's not realistic, and the consequence would be that many people would fall into sin. Because Islam does not recognize any relationship outside of a marriage contract. Now, Islam recognizes that people have needs. People have physical needs, and this is an important physical need. If permanent marriage is absolutely not an option, and the person is trying and trying, every door they knock on, it's a closed door, it does not open to them. So what do? Yes, ideally, be patient. Ideally, exercise self-restraint. But how long? How practical is that? What if a person reached a point where they couldn't? They were about to fall into sin. Then what is the Islamic solution here? What is any practical solution here? So as a discussion, I'm asking you, what is a practical solution here? Well, let's say there is no temporary marriage. We're trying to think of an alternative. What's an alternative?
Then change your perspective in life. Either you get married early.
Well, let's say the person's trying. They cannot. They go, they propose, but because the person doesn't have a stable job, no one is going to give them his daughter.
If they propose to the temporary marriage, they're going to give them their daughter then?
We'll talk about that. We'll get to that. But as an okay, so I'm asking you what the solution is. What's the solution?
I don't think there could be an alternative, to be honest, because wherever way you go, you're going to be hit by a wall.
So there's no other alternative, right? Is there any other practical alternative?
I mean, the only way is through sinning, but you don't want to do that.
Well, sinning is not an alternative, right? We're talking about a legal, lawful alternative. Islam does not consider that as an alternative. So is there a practical alternative here? Is permanent marriage an option, if an alternative, a realistic alternative, if it's not possible? For a lot of people, they can make it possible. Sure, if you really try, maybe it's possible. But for some people, really, it's just not possible. So if it's not possible, Islam recognizes there must be a legal avenue, because if you close the door on people, they will resort to sin. And once they sin, there's no boundary. That's it. They get sucked up in the culture of sin. And basically, they will fall into an immoral life. So Islam recognized there must be a temporary solution for this temporary problem. That is temporary marriage. That is the solution. It's a temporary solution for a temporary problem. When you've tried every other avenue, you've knocked on all doors, and you're still stuck in that situation, this is a temporary solution. Because it comes with less responsibility. Remember, there is no spending. The husband does not have to spend on his wife. They don't inherit one another, but they are still legally husband and wife. So because it comes with less responsibilities, then this becomes more of a practical solution. Now, you raised a valid concern, right? If someone's not giving their daughter for permanent marriage, you think they're going to give their daughter for temporary marriage? When you look at the issue of temporary marriage, obviously scholars, and even we have hadiths here, they impose the condition that if the girl is unmarried before, then she needs her father's permission, especially if she's dependent on him, she lives with the family, and her father does make decisions for her, right? She's not completely independent. Now, this is a very important condition that people must realize, right? So, in this case, obviously, when temporary marriage is discussed, it's not encouraging men to go and seek women who were unmarried. But there are women in society who are in a position to accept temporary marriage. For instance, a widow, right? Who really doesn't have a realistic chance of someone permanently marrying her and sponsoring her and taking care of her. Yes, that's the ideal situation, but let's be realistic in society. If she doesn't, she's been waiting for years for someone to marry her, or a divorcee. She's waiting for someone to remarry her. It's not happening. Okay, she also has needs. Islam says, okay, this is a temporary solution here. So yes, there are people in that situation, they are willing. And there's nothing shameful about that. Remember, this is a contract that you recognize between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a legal contract. And remember, in the first class, we spoke about the effect of signatures and that this is a verbal signature and commitment. And we gave many other examples in society that we have today, and that sheds light on the weight of our signatures. So yes, obviously a father who has an unmarried daughter in his house, obviously he's not going to accept. But remember, that's not the only scenario here for temporary marriage. There are other scenarios. That's the first point here, yes.
What do you say to people who would ask, like, this sounds like a temporary solution for men, but not for women who are trying to get married, but maybe can't?
Okay, so if someone says this is a temporary solution for men, but not women, what would we say about that? If you remember from our first class, we discussed the objection that states, Sunnis make this objection to the Shia, right? They say, would you, if you believe in temporary marriage and that it's halal in the religion of God, would you accept it for your daughter, mother or sister? Would you accept it? Remember that objection? And we addressed it. In detail, we basically addressed this misconception here. I'll ask you the following question. Imagine right now you're a parent and you have a daughter or son, but even a daughter, because that case is more sensitive, right? If you know that your daughter is going to fall into haram, it's imminent, there's no way. It's completely imminent, and somehow you were aware that she is going to fall into haram with someone. You have no way of stopping it. You don't have an immediate solution. In that case, would you accept temporary marriage for your daughter?
Can I ask this differently? If that's okay.
Just answer this question here. Would you accept that for your daughter?
It depends on the scenario.
I just stated the scenario.
For example,
You have a daughter, right? Whatever, she's 18, she's 20. It's been raised to your attention that it's imminent, she's going to college, she is going to fall into sin. You have no solution, you have no way of, that's it. She's pulled into this path of sin. It's imminent, it's going to happen. In that case, would you accept temporary marriage for her? If you don't, then what are you accepting for her? Zina. Which father would accept zina for his sister, for his daughter, for his, the common examples that they give? Remember? We talked about their objection. Who would accept this for his sister? Who would accept this for his daughter? My reply to them is, if you know your sister is going to fall into zina, would you accept that? If there is a temporary marriage contract that you accept in your book, Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, existed at the time of the Prophet. So you would not accept that, but you accept zina for your sister or for your daughter. See, no one's advocating that temporary marriage is for everyone, in all cases, there's a green light. No, it's for special circumstances. In those special circumstances, if you're a person who cares about God's law, of course you should accept it. Yes, you should not have let your daughter reach that point. You should have come up with another solution. And that's why we encourage early marriage. But these parents who are letting their kids wait till they're 25 and 30 to get married, there's consequences. When you are in the community and you know about people's challenges, I'm telling you very honestly, most of these youth, they're falling into sin. Do their parents care or no? I don't know. You answer that question. Maybe their parents don't know. Maybe they're not aware. I don't know what the problem is, but I'm telling you, most youth who are waiting that long, most of them are falling into sin. So you as a parent, you accept sin for your child, but you don't accept a temporary marriage contract? That's wrong thinking. That's an incorrect way to look at the situation here. Yes, if you're between two scenarios, that your son or daughter, they keep patient, they resist, they restrain themselves until inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them the tawfiq to get permanently married. That scenario versus temporary marriage, okay, of course, accept that scenario, no problem. No one's going to argue with you. But what if that's not the scenario here? The scenario here is sin. And remember, in Islam, we spoke about this in our first class. In the religion of Islam, masturbation is haram. It's a grave sin in the eye of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, maybe modern society today does not see it as immoral, but Islam is very strict with it. So that's not an option. So what do these parents want for their children? If they're not able to restrain themselves, these teenagers, these people in their early 20s and mid 20s, either they should do their best to get them married and guide them through the marriage process. If they're not doing that, no, go study, finish your bachelor's and then master's and then PhD. They're not being realistic. And sometimes a young man or woman will see that it's imminent they will fall into sin. This is a temporary solution. Now, if the father, if the mother, they want to be stubborn, they want to deny reality when they discover, they will let them live with the consequences. In the end, sometimes some children are going to fall into sin if you don't give them a temporary solution. And so sometimes this is a temporary solution. What are some arguments about that? Some thoughts about that? Yes?
What I can say is, especially nowadays, like you said, there's peer pressure, you can't get married early. And the problem with that scenario is most people, they meet each other in college, during college days. And he's serious and she's serious about their relationship. But there's a dilemma that they can't be together because there's no lawful way of being together. And if they cannot accept permanent marriage, at least accept temporary marriage with restrictions, for example, so they don't fall into sin, or accept the early marriage and help them grow together. But unfortunately, it's more of a taboo for them to marry early, and then maybe marriage will fail because of, they say that it's not, the foundation is not strong. So this is why they don't exercise the marriage early until they finish school. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, that is a valid point. And this brings us to our second point. Sometimes people, the boy and the girl, they are serious. They have serious intentions of marriage. They want to get to know one another. Now, it's going to take a while before they actually decide on the engagement, right? The katb kitab. And I'm seeing it in the community. Sometimes you see them for 6 months, for an entire year, communicating with one another, sometimes even going out, because they have the intention of getting married. Okay, the temporary marriage contract is also a solution for this case. You are serious about getting married, but remember, Islam is sensitive. Without a marriage contract, she's not lawful to you. The words that you use, the charming words that you use, the love words that you use, this is haram in Islamic law. Being very comfortable with how you talk, being intimate with your speech, this is haram. Most of the youth are falling into these sins. Yes, they do eventually get married, but remember that time before they actually got married, they committed many sins, according to Islamic law. So what's the solution for that? A temporary marriage contract can be used as a solution. And I know many families who do approve of that. They know that their daughter, their son is getting to know someone. They've already spoken to the family. So now it's structured, right? There is dignity in it. There's respect in it. It's structured. They're aware of what's going on. But they recognize that right now the engagement is still too soon. Okay, so how is your son going to speak to that girl? How is your daughter going to speak to that boy? Remember, they're going to talk. They're exchanging numbers. They're getting to know one another. They're getting to know each other's personality. The halal appropriate way is to do a temporary marriage contract here. And remember, in a temporary marriage contract, you can stipulate any condition you want. It can be stipulated in the temporary marriage contract that the marriage does not get consummated. That is a valid condition according to Islamic law. Both have to respect it. But that at least allows them to get to know one another, to speak comfortably to one another. Sometimes if they want to have lunch together, dinner together, go out, that becomes halal. So that is another purpose that the temporary marriage serves over here. And there are families who are open to that and they're understanding about it. Any thoughts about that? A third point or a third scenario that creates a need for a temporary marriage contract, which, as we discussed last week in Sunni fiqh, they have come up with the misyar marriage to address this concern, right? Let's say someone's traveling, especially in the past, when traveling, or a business commitment, or whatever. Today there's an educational commitment. A person has to travel for a few years. Even if the person is married, let's say a person went on a business trip that took several years. In the past, this was very common. Several months, 6 months, an entire year. Or you go to finish your education somewhere else, studying abroad. Now, in those 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, person has physical needs. And if you ask psychologists, if you ask biologists, if you ask doctors, they tell you sometimes when certain needs are not met, the person will not be functional. Sometimes, remember, it has repercussions. Resisting physical temptations to an extent is healthy. It empowers you, it's healthy, it's good. But sometimes for certain people, under certain pressure, it has negative consequences. It makes them dysfunctional. It impacts them psychologically. In that case, what's the solution for these people? The Sunnis, they came up with zawaj al-misyar. The person, while he's traveling, he does get married. We talked about their fiqhi perspective last week. Yes, the husband will stipulate a condition. I marry you, it's a permanent marriage, but I'm not obligated to spend on you. So accept this condition. And number two, I'm not obligated to spend time with you like I would with a permanent wife. I can come and go as I wish. Sunni scholars have allowed that because they realize there's a need. Sometimes certain people do have this need. And so this exact same scenario, in our school of thought, the temporary marriage could be a solution here. Any objections to this scenario? And remember the hadith that we mentioned in Sunni sources about the Sahaba, about the companions when they went on an expedition. Sometimes they would go on expeditions or wars, and they would be away from their families for months. It would take a long time by the time they travel. They go, they get settled, the war is over, they come back. Who remembers the hadith in Sunni sources about this particular situation? They came to the Prophet, they told him, Ya Rasulullah, we have physical needs. We don't know what to do. So what did some companions suggest that the Prophet rejected? So some of them said, okay, because we have this physical need, then the way to address it is to castrate ourselves. And that permanently, kills a person's desire. The Prophet said, no, this is haram. No one has the right to do this to themselves. So they told him, then what's the solution? The Prophet says, temporary marriage. Temporary marriage is the solution for this temporary problem. And remember, this is a Sunni hadith, in Bukhari and Muslim, as we examined. So he gave them permission for this circumstance here. And this demonstrates that the temporary marriage is a temporary solution for a temporary problem. So this is the third scenario.